In the candlelit grandeur of the cathedral, as Alara whispered, "I do," the groom's mother stormed the altar, yanking her veil away with a vicious tug that scattered pearls across the marble floor. Alara Voss stood frozen, her heart hammering against the delicate lace of her custom gown. The congregation gasped in unison. Marcus Hall, her fiancé of 2 years, reached out instinctively, but his mother, Vivian, shoved him aside with surprising strength. "This charade ends now." Vivian's voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, sharp as shattered crystal. "Before we go on, I'd love to hear from you. Share your country, city, and current local time in the comments. It's amazing to see this story reach across the world. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more." The morning had been perfect. Alara stood in the bridal suite of the cathedral, watching Chicago's skyline shimmer through the high windows. Her custom gown fitted exactly as she had imagined it, the veil catching the morning light like something borrowed from a better dream. Her best friend Lena had been there since 6 in the morning, threading hairpins and talking too fast about the reception, the flowers, the way Marcus had looked at her the first time they danced. It had taken 2 years to get here, 2 years of quiet dinners and late-night conversations about the future, the brownstone they would find someday, the books they would pile on every shelf, the life they would build together, the way 2 people build things when they genuinely mean to make them last. Marcus Halle was not perfect, but he was hers. She had believed that completely. She walked down the aisle to music she had chosen herself. She reached the altar. She looked at Marcus and felt the particular stillness of someone arriving at the thing they have worked toward, the quiet certainty that the right answer is finally in front of them. She was halfway through the words "I do" when the cathedral doors opened. Vivian Halle moved through the aisle, the way a woman moves when she has rehearsed this moment and has no intention of stopping. Navy designer suit, manicured hands, the particular fury of someone who believes they are saving something. She reached the altar before security understood what was happening. She grabbed the veil with both hands and pulled. The sound of pearls scattering across marble was the loudest thing Alara had ever heard. She stood frozen, the torn fabric in her grip, the congregation on its feet around her, 300 people inhaling at the same moment. "You think you're good enough for my son?" Vivian's voice carried to every corner of the vaulted ceiling. "A nobody from nowhere? Marcus deserves legacy, not some opportunist who hid her true intentions." Marcus reached for his mother. She pushed him aside with a strength that surprised everyone, including him. "Mother, stop this. I love Alara." But Vivian had already opened her tablet. The image projected onto the side wall of the cathedral was not a mistake, not a coincidence, not something she had found by accident. It had been prepared. It had been planned. A man's face filled the screen, older, silver-haired, but with stormy gray eyes that Alara had seen every morning in her own mirror for 29 years. Headlines surrounded the photograph: DNA documentation, financial records. The name Reginald Ashford in bold type above words like Trillionaire and secret heir and located after decades. "Your mother hid you to protect you from his enemies," Vivian said. "But I won't let a hidden princess steal my family's future." Alara looked at Marcus. She needed him to tell her this was wrong. She needed his face to say that he knew nothing, that this was as new and impossible and shattering for him as it was for her. His face did not say that. "I suspected something," he said quietly, as chaos moved through the cathedral around them. "She showed me fragments weeks ago. I didn't fully believe it. I love you for you, Alara, not the money." He had known. He had carried it. He had chosen not to tell her. The pearls from her veil lay scattered across the marble floor like small white ruins of the morning she had planned. Lena caught her arm outside, got her into a car, held her hand as Chicago blurred past the windows. Alara's phone was already lighting up. Unknown numbers, messages from strangers, a name she didn't recognize, asking things she didn't understand. Then one message, different from the others, an attorney's name. 4 words that landed in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. Mr. Ashford would like to meet. She looked at her reflection in the car window. A bride with no wedding. A woman with no name she recognized. A life she had believed in, lying scattered on a cathedral floor behind her. She pressed her hand flat against the cold glass. She breathed. Rehook. The car took her to Ashford Tower, a private underground entrance, security personnel with earpieces, an elevator that opened directly into a penthouse overlooking the Chicago River. And when the doors opened, a tall, silver-haired man with stormy gray eyes stood across the room and looked at her the way people look at something they had given up hoping to see. "Alara," he said, his voice carrying a faint tremor he couldn't control. "I never thought I would see this day." She still had the torn veil in her hand. She looked at the face that matched her own and asked the only question that mattered. "Are you really my father?" What he told her next would reach back 30 years, to a secret, a staged death, a coma, and a mother who had sacrificed everything to keep her daughter safe. The penthouse was not what Alara expected wealth to look like. She had imagined something louder, more ostentatious. What she found instead was a space that felt like thought, modern art that asked questions rather than made declarations, clean lines, the kind of quiet that only exists when everything in a room has been deliberately chosen. Floor-to-ceiling windows held the entire city at a respectful distance below. A woman in a black suit introduced herself as Sophia Reyes, Mr. Ashford's chief of staff, and showed Alara and Lena to a wide sectional sofa. Tea arrived. Sophia and Lena were gently moved to another room. The elevator chimed. Reginald Ashford walked in leaning slightly on a sleek black cane, his silver hair swept back from a strong forehead. His gray eyes, her gray eyes, finding her immediately and staying there with the careful attention of someone who is afraid of startling something fragile. He stopped a few feet away and simply looked at her. "Alara," he said, just her name, the word carrying 30 years of weight. She stood slowly, the torn veil still in her hand. "Are you really my father?" He nodded. He sat down across from her, and he began. He had met her mother Isabel at a conference in Geneva, a climate scientist, brilliant, with fire at the center of everything she did. They had fallen fast and completely, the way people do when they are both too certain to be cautious. But his success had drawn the wrong kind of attention. Corporate rivals, threats, 2 attempts on his life. When Isabel became pregnant, they made a decision together. A staged car accident. A hidden life. Protection above everything else. Then the real attack came. A poison that took him into a coma for 14 months. By the time he woke, Isabel had died of illness 2 years earlier. Alara's Aunt Clara had gone silent. The trail had been systematically erased. He had spent years looking. He had never stopped. 3 weeks ago, a DNA test had confirmed what his investigators had finally traced. He reached into his jacket and placed a small, worn locket on the table between them. Inside was a photograph of a young woman holding a toddler with gray eyes. Alara picked it up with both hands and held it for a long time. She talked until midnight about her modest apartments and scholarship-funded education, the late nights debugging code at her analytics firm, the small dreams she had carried without knowing they were substitutions for something she had never been told to want. Reginald listened with the focused attention of a man making up for lost time, asking questions that revealed how sharp his mind was, even as his expression stayed soft with something she had no name for yet. She was shown to a guest suite larger than her previous apartment. She lay on a bed too comfortable to feel real, in a building that bore her father's name, in a city she had lived in her whole life without knowing it also contained this. She did not sleep for a long time, but somewhere beneath the weight and the confusion and the grief the morning she had lost, something else was forming. Something that did not have a shape yet, but was solid. The next morning began with tailored clothes, a private breakfast, and a team assembled to help her understand what she had inherited. Financial advisors who spoke in terms of voting shares and portfolio structures, a media strategist, a security expert named Harlan Cross, who said very little and missed nothing, and one number that her father's advisor placed on the table in a sunlit conference room as if it were simply a fact: 48% ownership of Ashford Dynamics, a trillion-dollar technology empire, her name already on proxy documents. "I don't know anything about running something like this," she said. Reginald walked in behind her. "That's why we're here," he said. "You have your mother's intellect and my resilience." The training began that afternoon, and what Alara discovered about herself in the weeks that followed would surprise everyone, including her. The weeks that followed were disorienting in the specific way that genuine transformation always is: not dramatic, not cinematic, just relentlessly new. Mornings began with intensive briefings. Quantum computing systems that solved in seconds what supercomputers once required days to process. Modular solar systems engineered for disaster zones. AI-driven climate models with accuracy that still quietly startled the scientists who built them. Alara sat through these briefings with the focused attention she had once applied to debugging code at her desk, finding the structural logic beneath the complexity, mapping the connections, identifying where the gaps were. By the end of the second week, she was asking questions that made the briefers pause. "You've got sharp instincts," Julian Kane, the media strategist, told her after a simulated press negotiation in which she identified two critical vulnerabilities. In a proposed public statement, before he had finished presenting it, "The boardroom will suit you." She was not sure she believed him, but she was starting to believe that the woman who had always solved puzzles for a living was not as unprepared for this as she had feared. Afternoons brought different lessons: crisis communication, high society protocol, self-defense sessions with Harlan that left her sore and more aware of her own physical capability than she had ever been. She was not graceful in these sessions. She was persistent, which Harlan told her was worth more. Evenings, Reginald. He would tell her about Isabel during dinner on the penthouse terrace, her laugh, her advocacy for environmental justice, the particular way she had of challenging him to be better than he planned to be. In return, Alara showed him photographs on her phone, small moments from a childhood he had never seen. A school recital, a summer at her aunt's house, the first time she saw Lake Michigan and understood why people moved here and never left. The stranger across the table became, slowly and without announcement, family. She also learned about the fractures. Dr. Victor Lang had been Reginald's most trusted protege for a decade. He was charismatic and precise, and entirely committed to a vision of the company that Reginald had spent his career resisting: defense contracts, military applications. The weaponization of technology, built to do the opposite. He sees your arrival as a threat to his influence, Reginald told her quietly over dinner. He will come to you with a compelling argument. He always does. Lang requested a meeting 10 days later in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the river. He was exactly what she had been told to expect. Smooth, certain, the kind of intelligence that presents itself as generosity. The world is changing, Alara. Defense contracts would secure our future. Your father is old-fashioned. With your fresh perspective, we could dominate this sector. I agree the world is changing, she said, with the poise that had been practiced into her across the previous 2 weeks. But we won't dominate by feeding conflict. Ashford will lead through sustainability and progress. Lang smiled thinly. Careful. Empires fall when heirs hesitate. That evening, Reginald looked at her across the dinner table with an expression she was still learning to read. You sounded like your mother, he said. Lena, who visited daily with Thai takeout and the specific grounding effect of 20 years of genuine friendship, flopped onto the penthouse sofa that night and looked at her with open awe. Girl, you are in a very expensive, slightly terrifying movie. Alara laughed. It was the first real laugh in 2 weeks. It surprised her with how good it felt. She also met Marcus. On the 10th day, she agreed to a quiet meeting at a secure downtown cafe, Harlan and 2 guards positioned nearby. Marcus arrived early, exhausted, wearing a simple gray sweater instead of his usual polished confidence. The bruise from the wedding chaos had faded to yellow at his jaw. He said everything she had needed to hear, and she believed most of it. But belief and trust are different structures, and the cathedral had taught her the difference. I need time, she told him. My life isn't simple anymore. He nodded. I'll wait, he said. However long it takes. She drove back to the tower and stood at the window for a long time, looking at the city. Because there was still a gala coming, an official announcement, and someone who wanted to make sure she never made it to the podium. The Ashford Cultural Center had been transformed for the evening into something that communicated power without apologizing for it. Crystal chandeliers, an orchestral quartet, guests in designer attire who had been carefully chosen to witness the announcement that would shift the architecture of an empire. Alara wore a custom emerald green gown that had been selected with her input by a stylist who understood the difference between dressing someone and dressing someone for a moment. Her hair was swept up. Her father walked beside her as they entered to a room that turned collectively in their direction. She found Marcus at the edge of the crowd, keeping his distance, watching her with the quiet admiration of someone who has accepted that admiration is all they currently have the right to offer. She acknowledged him with a small nod, nothing more. Her speech was the center of everything. Standing at the podium before the assembled power of a room that 2 months ago would have been as unreachable as another planet, Alara felt something settle in her chest. Not confidence exactly, but its quieter, more permanent relative. Certainty. Tonight marks not just a transition of power, but a renewed commitment. Her voice carried across the ballroom without straying. Ashford Dynamics will harness technology to heal our planet and elevate humanity. Together, we can build a legacy worth inheriting. Applause moved through the room like weather. Reginald stood to her left, and the expression on his face was the kind that people spend their entire lives hoping to see on someone who matters to them. Then the first shot rang out. The sharp crack cut through the music, and every sound in the ballroom stopped simultaneously. Screams came a half-second later. Guests dropped. Security moved. Alara felt the impact of arms around her before she understood what was happening. Someone pulling her down, shielding her, absorbing the space between her body and whatever was coming from the balcony above. A second shot came closer. Harlan's team responded immediately, moving toward the balcony position as the room evacuated in controlled chaos. She looked up and found Marcus above her, his face tight with pain, blood already seeping through the shoulder of his tuxedo from a graze that had found him instead of her. "Stay down," he said through his teeth. "Why did you do that?" "Because I couldn't stand by again," he said. "Not when it mattered." In the armored vehicle moving toward the tower, she pressed a cloth to his wound and felt the specific, complicated weight of a person who has just watched someone do the thing they needed them to do. Too late, but sincerely. Investigators pointed toward Victor Lang's associates, though definitive proof remained elusive that night. Reginald told her gravely, later, in the quiet of his study, "This is the world you're entering. Danger comes with the power, but so does the ability to change things." Marcus was treated and rested under doctor supervision in a room down the hall. Lena went home with extra security. The city spread out 30 floors below the penthouse balcony, and Alara stood in the cool wind and let the full shape of the last 2 months arrive without trying to manage it. Everything that had been stripped away at the altar. Everything that had grown in its place. And a question she was finally ready to begin answering. She stood on the balcony for a long time after the gala. The city lights stretched in every direction, ordered and brilliant, each one representing something built by someone who had decided to begin. The cool wind moved through her hair. The torn veil from the cathedral was long gone, but she could still feel the precise moment it had been taken from her. The sound of pearls hitting marble, the collective gasp of 300 people, the particular sensation of a life being stripped down to its actual structure. She thought about Vivian Hale's fury and what had driven it. Not hatred, exactly. Fear. The fear of a woman who had looked at her son's future and made a calculation about its value and found herself outmaneuvered by a truth she could not control. She had not known about the inheritance when she ordered the investigation. She had been looking for something to use against a nobody from nowhere, and had found something that turned her own plan to rubble. She thought about Marcus, about the difference between a man who stands by and a man who steps in front, about how the second thing does not erase the first, but how it changes the arithmetic of what comes next, about whether trust could be rebuilt between two people who had shared something real, or whether the version of her that had loved him simply no longer existed, replaced by someone who needed more than she had once been willing to ask for. She thought about Reginald, who had spent 30 years searching for a daughter he believed was gone, who had sat across from her at a dinner table and built a bridge in the slow, careful way that only genuine people build things. Her mother's gray eyes in an older face. Her own stubborn precision reflected back at her from the other side of decades she had missed. She thought about Victor Lang and the meeting that was still ahead of her. About the investors, the board, the rivals who had spent years assuming this empire would eventually come to them. About the technology sitting in those labs, quantum processors and climate models, and solar systems designed for disaster zones, and what it could do in the hands of someone who understood both its power and its responsibility. She was not the woman who had walked down that cathedral aisle 2 months ago. That woman had been real. She did not dismiss her. But the veil that had been torn from her head in public humiliation had also, in being torn, removed something else. The assumption that her story had already been written. That she knew the shape of her life. that she was the modest protagonist of a modest future. She was Alara Ashford, heir to something that could shape the world she lived in, daughter of a woman who had sacrificed everything to protect her, and a man who had spent 3 decades carrying the weight of not knowing, trained now in the specific disciplines of power, its language, its pressure, its temptations, its genuine possibilities. Tomorrow she would return to the board. She would address the Lang question with the precision it required. She would begin the work of understanding, fully and without shortcuts, the empire she had inherited and what she intended to do with it. She would take it slowly with Marcus. She owed herself that patience. She would give Reginald the relationship he had searched 30 years to find. She owed him that too. But standing on the balcony, with the wind moving through her hair and the city laid out below her like a map of everything possible, Alara felt something she had not felt since the morning of her wedding. Not the fragile certainty of a woman who thought she knew what her life looked like. The grounded, unshakable certainty of a woman who no longer needed to. The veil had not ended her story. It had only torn away the illusions. And what it revealed beneath, that was worth every scattered pearl.